Hmm.
Welcome to Find Your Way, a monthly podcast hosted by newclevelandradio.net on YouTube and various other platforms. Find Your Way is hosted by Alison Pena and her co-host, Christy Anderson, who happens to be in Greece right now celebrating her anniversary. The Find Your Way Beyond Grief, Heartbreak, and Loss podcast was created to support people to move forward and after loss with powerful stories, insights, discussions, interviews, and resources. Today, Alison will introduce us to our guest, Scott Martin. Please check the show notes for significant information on our guest and how to connect with all of us as well. We ask for your continued support as we take a deep dive into grief, heartbreak, and loss stories. We will show the heartbreak, but also the inspiration, clarity, and transformation available for those who are willing to engage in healing and growth. So, with that, I'm going to ask Alison to take it away.
Okay. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our featured guest, Scott Martin, who has an upcoming book that he's going to tell us about called Play from the Heart. He went from being a rising soccer coach, star, just moving on in his life with an incredible future ahead of him. And then he was felled by a disease or an illness. I don't even know what you would call it. And went from the Nike camp where he was teaching to in the hospital, fighting for his life. I don't want to spend a lot of time going into your history because you've had an incredible road of ups and downs with your coaching, and you have essentially risen like a phoenix from the ashes more than once in the course of these years. So what I'd like to do is ask you to just tell your story, and then I have some questions to ask you. Karen may sort of raise her hand for a question in the middle, so please don't be concerned if we interrupt you, if we hit a piece that we're like, oh, wow, we want to know more about that. So take it away, Scott.
Okay. First of all, thank you, ladies. It's taken us a bit to get through here to this point, but it's a relief to finally meet. You know, there's meeting online and through writing and emails, but then there's meetings so we could see each other and talk to each other. So this is fantastic, and I'm looking forward to this. So my story, it does go back a bit to, I had been a soccer player when I was 16 years old. I started playing with first division club here in the United States and working my way through to try to find maybe possible avenues to get into professional. But back at that time, North American Soccer League had their doors closed to anyone that was not European. So I ended up going to college and playing there and teaching at the high school level, social studies and history, and running soccer programs. So when the opportunity came for me to move to the college ranks, it was perfect timing. So I did that. Went through my first year. I was coaching at the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire, the women's program there. And my first year, we did quite well. We were nationally ranked. Going into year two, this is early 90s, folks. Going into year two, great recruiting class. This was the summertime. I was heading back over to Europe, and that's what I tended to do during my summers. I had opportunities to take players from the United States and go over and play major tournaments there, and this was no different that summer. But this time it was going to be with college players. Nike happened to give me a call and said, "Hey, we heard some good things about you. We'd like you to come down to a regional camp outside of Chicago, and there's going to be 100 of the top players in the Midwest." I mean, for a college soccer coach, yeah, I'll be there. The only thing is, you guys, I showed up in Adidas because that's what we wore. I didn't have a lick of Nike on me. It stirred a little bit. It brought not commotion, but it brought some smiles from the Nike people. And they say, hey, just go over to the closet and throw on whatever you want, take whatever you want. Okay. Um, Also at the camp, there were national team players there. There were coaches from across the country. So I was happy as a clam at high tide. And we started doing some training exercises with the players. And there was an exhibition match amongst the coaches and these national team players, which is fantastic. But for the first time in my life, I had to pull myself off the field because something was wrong with me. I was fatigued. I spent that night either throwing up profusely in the bathroom or shivering like crazy or sweating like crazy in my dorm room. So I knew something was bad. Something was going on. But being in the early 90s, this is before cell phones. I was supposed to show up at my mother's house in southern Wisconsin 2 days later, but I ended up showing up a day early because I had no idea where hospitals were. So if you don't know where a doctor is, you go to mom. As soon as she
Yeah.
saw me, she said, something's wrong with you. You get your butt over to the emergency room. Presented myself. They said, here, drink some Gatorade. You're going to be fine. No problem. Yeah. No. Woke up the next morning, worse. Had to cancel a couple of recruiting trips out of Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and something else was going on. And my stepfather was in charge of taking me back over to the emergency room. This is where I kind of blacked out, where I don't know
Mhm.
what happened. I was told that I was coherent, but when I arrived the second time in the emergency room, someone from ICU, intensive care unit, happened to be there, and they noticed what was going on. They said, this guy's septic. I mean, he's in trouble because septic means,
Yeah.
folks, all my organs are shutting down and everything,
Yep.
not looking too good. Uh, so this is where I don't remember anything for a month.
For a
Um,
month.
for a month, 1 month. I woke up from probably a medically induced coma, not initially, but medically induced coma, to learn that, and this is where things got kind of crazy, that in order to save my life, my mother and one of my brothers had to make the decision either let me go or amputate both hands, parts of both feet, and see how it basically handle life.
Mm.
It's a tough burden to put on family. And
So
then I
you
learned about this. Yeah, go ahead.
so you went to the ER and you woke up in an entirely different reality.
Exactly. I couldn't move, Allison. I couldn't move. And first thought was, I'm paralyzed. There was a
Yeah.
neck brace on me. I didn't know what was going on. Incoherent. Doctor came in and started talking with me. And one thing he told me was, well, and I was intubated, so I can't talk. And one of the things he said to me was, the reason why you can't move is that you've lost approximately 40 pounds of muscle through
Right.
atrophy. Can't do anything. Then he laid the bomb about the amputations. And along that line, he also mentioned that he described, this is group A strep and necrotizing fasciitis. And then he said what the media tended to call it at that time. And that's what it really sank home, the flesh-eating disease.
Mm.
It's not bugs or anything. It's just how the body protects itself. And it tends to close off the arteries or the veins at the extremities. Hence, therefore, there was no blood flow. Things were dying. And they decided to do the amputations. So that's where things, I guess you could say this is a fork in the road. It's more like I stepped on a rake and was slapped in the face, sort of thing, more than a fork. But this is also where I started doing something really stupid, you guys. I mean, I would describe it as a male thing. I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to know about it. My attitude was put me in a wheelchair and let me go, let me go. I was supposed to be heading to Europe and missed that. I had players coming in for preseason training. I just wanted to get back to work. But I started right away not internalizing everything that was going on. And I
Mhm.
ended up paying for that 4 years later when I ran into the brick wall of depression. I really ran smack dab into it.
You're talking about a grief that most of us don't
Mm.
recognize, okay? Because when we talk about grief, it's typically, you know, I lost my spouse. Allison lost her mother. She lost her mother-in-law. Those are the things that we think about. But the reality of it is, when we lose something of ourselves,
Mm,
That is probably a much deeper grief because we truly have to reinvent ourselves.
exactly. Exactly. And it's not out of laziness that I avoided it. And I think it's probably common. It's out of shock, to say the simple term. My God, I went from a white guy in athletics, and it was just there's your ladder, man. Just start climbing. So all of a
Yep.
sudden, and I really started experiencing this once I was out of the hospital. I was labeled as disabled, severely disabled.
Mhm.
That's a 180 switch,
Yeah.
out in the world, especially among males,
Yep.
especially in athletics. And it's something I started learning the hard way about one of the bad parts of society, really bad part of society. It's ugly. I didn't
Yep.
like it. Yeah,
I mean, this is something that we talk about a lot, that with grief, one of the biggest things that happens is that our sense of identity blows up because
exactly.
who we are is associated with what are our relationships? How are we moving forward in the world? What does our future look like? And our trust in ourselves
Mm,
gets damaged.
exactly.
And then what is our purpose? If we aren't who we were, who are we? And
Hmm.
then what's our purpose? Would you say
Hmm.
that, I mean, that is a common experience, would you
Oh my
say?
God. Being an athlete, I lost all confidence.
Yep.
It did trickle a little bit. So I lost confidence. And without that in athletics, I mean, what a bad combination. I ended up again running into that brick wall depression. I resigned. I couldn't because
Mhm.
I wasn't helping the program. I mean, we went on for 4 years. We were still nationally ranked. We were still fine. But I described it in the book as this, that I was doing a pretty good job of faking myself who I was. And I
Yeah.
think also people around me did as well. Nobody talked about it. We all avoided it. I mean, it still came down to me. I'm not blaming anyone, but we all just something else to talk about. We didn't want to. I wish we would have. I wish we would have, and I didn't seek out any help at the time either. I don't think that was more of a male thing about my ego. I think I'm okay with my ego. I think it was probably more of a financial thing, really.
And you said
Yeah,
this was back in the 1990s, right?
right. 93 is when I became ill.
So
And yeah,
a lot of help back then was totally different than it is today. And I
yeah,
think people are more, they're not as they're not as good as they should be about talking about these things, but
true.
we're getting better because there are people like yourself and myself that are coming out and just saying, hey, this is what it really is. And
Hmm.
you know what? Maybe I can't do it that way anymore, but I can do it this way. But we also have to learn how to do it the new way.
We do, and it becomes difficult. I really, you know, quite a preponderance on everything that I had to go through. I still had a couple weeks in ICU to gain back some of the strength. When I switched over to rehab and started healing and strengthening and becoming independent because that's the objective there. I was 4 months in rehab, guys, but at the
Mhm.
point where I was originally fitted for hooks, my mind was, I'm not doing this. Then when I learned and we figured out a way for me to get what these are, myoelectrics, I asked for a pencil and paper and what you were just talking about, that I wrote a training manual that I titled The Soccer Atlas. Where are we going and how are we going to get there? I wrote that for my program because I wasn't going to be able to demonstrate. I had to change. That's what we're into now with our discussion here, is so many things have to happen. There's no checklist. There is none. Like, okay, you're done with A, check that off. Go to B, check that off. There is none. So how do we do that? And at the same time, how do we comprehend it all? And I had no freaking clue on what to do. Yeah.
One of the really interesting things about your book was how um, the way that you came through it, threaded through both your healing and through the work that you did with your soccer rats later. And so there were threads of resilience that showed up. So what I'd like to talk to you about now is, can you talk about the resilience that it took to come back through the healing and start looking for and finding new purpose?
The resilience, I believe, I gained from my mother. So what I would
Okay.
describe this way, which is going to be hard for people, but this is what people have had to deal with in their lives. My mother was 19. She was a war widow with a newborn. My God. That's my half brother. She ended up marrying my father. They ended up having 5 kids, and she went through hell. My mom, though, working, she was the president of the League of Women Voters for the state of Wisconsin. Um, had all of this going on and dealing with a husband that belittled her physically and emotionally. And she ended up, tough woman, early 60s, said enough and divorced.
Mm.
We all went, she started working 3 jobs, you get the picture. That's where
Yeah.
I think I picked up that resilience from, as in, I'm going to figure this out. You know, I had support
Yes.
of my family. And at one point, and I described this early in the book too, my mom said, "You're going to
Yeah.
figure out ways to move forward." I mean, it was, "You're going to." And it was, "Yeah, you bet. You
Were
bet."
your
And
siblings supportive?
oh,
Your
everyone is supportive. But going back to what I was saying, everyone was also avoiding the topic.
okay,
We didn't hit on it. That was probably wrong, I would imagine. Again, I didn't though go out and seek professional help at all because
Right.
all I wanted to do was get back to work.
got
I
it.
mean, I was behind. I
Yeah.
had to, and also prove myself. There's some maleness in that too, I suppose. But just as a human being, I had to prove myself.
Well, I think that was a time you didn't talk about it. But one of the reasons that we started this podcast
Hmm.
is that we want to normalize the conversation around grief so that people can
Amen.
actually have these conversations,
Hmm.
because everybody dies and everybody loves someone who will die. And everybody has probably experienced someone who has had a life event like yours,
Hmm.
though yours is very drastic, but a life event that changed everything
Hmm.
that they
Yeah.
need to support, you know. Um, and so my brother died um, about 40 years ago. So in the 70s, early 80s.
Hmm.
And he had a genetic disease and he died very suddenly. And then he was gone. It was the summer. I was with all my cousins and nobody mentioned his name, the entire summer,
Hmm.
the entire summer. And so I think it was a thing. If we don't mention it, and I think people are scared of making you feel worse.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I agree with that. But there's something else I would like to bring up in that
Mhm.
when I went back to coaching it, and even during that time, all of my coaching, whenever I put out my hand before a match to shake the opponent's coach's hand, I never had a female opposing coach pull back or anything. But I think that I scared a lot of males because of that male mortality, and that
Ah.
what they would take from our handshake, if they noticed, I think a lot of times, and I use this to my advantage, that they all of a sudden thought, "Oh, I got a handicap guy here. This is going to be easy." Like, mm-mm-mm. That actually I would use to my advantage because I know that they were going to be soft then, and also it
Yep.
incentivized me. I'm going to kick your ass then, man.
Yeah.
Don't you dare disrespect me or someone like me, with a disability. Don't you dare. So therefore,
Yeah.
we're going to take it out on you. Yeah. So that was, yeah, I think mortality, there's a frightening because who knows anybody, especially listening, I'm a quad for God's sakes. I'm a quad amputee that's missing as much as I am. So to
Yep.
deal with that and try to comprehend it, because it could happen to anyone. Boom.
Yep.
Tomorrow, somebody can get sick, go through the same thing I did, actually survive, and then have to deal with it. It could happen to anyone. So, like you guys are doing with this show, and I applaud you. And that's one of the reasons why I came to you. And this was what you're doing. You're making a difference because we need to educate. Need to educate. And that's where the disabled community, I think, is falling flat on how to deal with getting the word out on it's okay to be disabled, you know, to
Well,
Yep.
work off of that.
it's interesting. I was reading something the other day about how parents don't want their young children to acknowledge somebody who is disabled or old. Okay. And the theory behind it is you don't want that child to embarrass somebody. But the reality of it is children are so innocent. They just want to understand.
Mhm.
And, I wrote a blog about it the other day saying we have to stop protecting each other. Okay. If I were to come up to you, Scott, and say, can you tell me about your hands? Why they look different? What's wrong with learning about that? Okay. Because
Yeah.
my hands don't look like everybody else's either. Okay. So let's have these conversations. Let's understand because the hands is not your personality.
True.
You're a whole other person inside.
True. And I go into it deep in the book. By the way, Allison, I'll correct you. It's play from your heart, not
Play from your heart.
play
Okay,
from your
thank you.
heart. It's okay. But I think that the second half of the book is about those soccer rats that Allison mentioned. These are 12-year-old kids that I started coaching, and we'll get into it probably.
Definitely.
They initially were kind of freaked out. I mean, why wouldn't you be? And yes, the kids are afraid to ask questions, but they need to. So, for example, now I substitute teach at a high school here in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and it's sophomore, juniors, and seniors. So, at the beginning of the year, and I sub a lot. Beginning of the year, when I have class of sophomores, I talk to them about me and the journey. That has paid off hundredfold on them being comfortable with me. And
Yep.
I always end it with, I ask if anyone has any questions. And then I also say, okay, if you don't, at some time when you have me in the future, feel free to say, hey, Mr. Martin, I wasn't comfortable asking before, but now I have a question for you. And that happens. That happens. So it's pretty cool. So that's what I'm talking about, education. And
Yep.
that's part of why the book is out there. I mean, that was a big part of writing the book initially. It's changed now as the world has changed, as Alison and I were talking about in the green room earlier. Yeah, so there's a different call for this, but that's still one of the things I want to do. Try to normalize, try to make a dent in it, whatever we can, for people to understand we're all different, folks. Let's
So
just accept each other. Go ahead.
yep. So I would speculate that, you've talked a lot about being as a white athlete, the world was your oyster, and then
Yeah.
it wasn't.
Yeah.
I suspect that what you say and how you carry yourself when you have these conversations with kids in your classes, it makes a big difference to what they perceive a man to be.
That's deep. You are spot on with that. Really, because it's just, yeah, that's exactly how that happens. Because I have to, and I've accepted that. Okay, the more I do podcasts, I think I've done probably 50 and more journalists and stuff. I'm accepting it because I now look at it as this is my responsibility because there's not many examples out there. So why not? Here's one. All right, it's me. So I'll take it on. Very good
Yep.
point, Allison. Very good point.
So why did you choose the title Play from Your Heart?
Going back when I was a freshman in college and I started coaching, I would tell players right away, turn off your brain and play from your heart because there's a difference. With the World Cup coming, people I hope watch some of the matches. And even at that level, I talked about the U.S. men's national team drives me crazy because they're thinking too much and they're screwing up because they're thinking too much. They're not just playing. So, folks, when the World Cup comes and you're watching some of that, the upper level players and upper level teams, their brains off. They're just playing by instinct because they've reached that point. So, and that's how I coach. I try really to get past the thinking part, and it comes down to confidence. But I think I've proven that a couple of state championships, national rank programs, all of this. I've had high school players going on and playing college. So I think I've proven my theory being correct. It's
Yep.
to get the players comfortable so they don't have to think and just play from your heart. Because I think that the title actually covers the entire book from everything we've been talking about so far. I think people probably get that.
Well, I think if
Absolutely.
sports was played from the heart more often, that we would have, there's still going to be competition, obviously, but it's not going to
Mhm.
be that nasty competition that we see in a lot
Oh,
of sports. And
yeah,
that's the thing that usually gets to me. It's like, come on, you've got the talent. Just play the game. Let me watch the
exactly.
game instead of seeing the arguments on the sidelines.
Exactly. And I'll bring up the male thing again. I'm coaching a group of under 19 boys, state level team here in Wisconsin, and we finally had our first full training session where I'm presenting my concepts. We have a tournament this weekend. This is going to be interesting. But as I'm watching them play, and we're playing offense versus defense, and I let it go because I could see the problems they were having. Let it go until the end. We pulled together. I said, "You're playing like guys. You guys are thinking that you're macho. You're thinking that you have to pull the trigger and score every time you touch the ball. You don't have to. It's try to break down the opponent. That's what we need to get to." It started to click in them a little bit. It's not, I have to go score. Now it's going to be, we will break down the opponent. So it goes along with that, pulling away from the brain and allowing them to just be creative. That's what it comes down
Yep.
to. Here's one thing I always like to bring up. If anyone knows Jackson Pollock was a drip painter,
Yep.
1940s and 50s. If you if for every player on one team had a color in the ball, and every time they touched that ball, that color would be lined on the field. When you were done with a match and went and hovered over the field and looked down, I believe that people would see a Jackson Pollock painting, drip painting, because of all the colors that blend together all around. It's not just straightforward lines or anything. That's not now how I see the game. And my players do not play like that. Some do. But it's a free flowing, it just, somebody go look at a Jackson Pollock painting. That's how I view the game. I'm kind of crazy. But that's how I view the game, and that's how my team tends to play, and we end up doing quite well. So there's something wrong with it. There is an art to it. There is an art to it. Most
So
definitely.
I would love to hear about there are two things that there are a few things I want to get in before we're done, but the soccer rats are absolutely one of them. So these
Yeah.
soccer rats, they were third level.
Uh-huh.
They were looked down on in
Mm-hmm.
the hierarchy of teams,
Mm-hmm.
much in the way that you with your prosthetic hands were looked
Isn't
down
it?
on by some people. So I saw that parallel.
Oh yeah.
Um, so the soccer rats, if you could talk about the soccer rats, and then the other thing that I was really fascinated by is the thread of music through the
Mm.
book.
Okay.
Because
Glad
one
you
of the
picked up
things
on
that music does is moves emotion through the
it. Mm-hmm.
body.
Very
So
good.
hits at a cellular level.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
so in whatever order or whatever sequence you wish, those are the two things I'd
Sure.
love you to tackle next.
Let me define what a soccer rat is. A soccer rat is one of those kids, boy, girl, that usually has a soccer ball at their feet. And it's usually a beat up old soccer ball. They might sleep with it. They'll do everything with it. They keep that ball pumped up. All right, that's a soccer rat. They're just always knocking a ball off a wall or whatever. They don't need a coach. They don't, that's what I look for. So here's what happened with this, folks. And this is the second half of the book. So I mentioned how I hit the brick wall of depression. I resigned my position. We'll skip past the $10 million medical malpractice trial that I lost. And we'll even skip past, I left coaching soccer to raise 5 adopted kids from Romania and Ethiopia. We'll skip past that for now. If you want to, you can go back to it.
We'll get there.
It's up to you. It's up to you guys.
We'll
So I was
definitely get
out,
there.
I was away from coaching for 20 years, still keeping an eye on everything that was going on and reading and everything. And I finally, when my youngest got firmly implanted into high school, I said, okay, I'm going back to coaching. And we were living in Bellingham, Washington at the time. And there was a large club there. One of these clubs that people hear about where parents are expected to pay thousands of dollars for their kid to play. And I received a good salary. It was okay. But the expectation is there. So it's upper level. So I showed up and with my resume, the guy, it was a new director of coaching. He had my resume and I showed up. And first of all, the guy never stood up from his desk. He never shook my hand. Tells you something. I showed up and he said, well, you're going to be coaching the U13C team. Like, okay, what does that mean? Well, that's the bottom. Like, so there's an A team and a B team, and I've got the C team. And I wasn't pushy by saying, well, my resume, okay. But I had seen these kids train. I had seen them through tryouts. And I knew that the only thing my kids didn't have was they weren't as big as the A team and the B team. And they tended to lack confidence during drills. And I hate drills, by the way. We play. So putting those two things together and what you just tapped on it, Allison, I knew that doggone it, you're showing me disrespect and you're also showing disrespect to these kids. We're going to prove something wrong with you, man. We're going to do something about it. I did not at the time think what we were going to end up doing, but we did it. So I pulled the kids together. We started working on them getting to know me and working about building this team and the concepts that I have about turn off your brain, play from your heart and all these. And I also, right from the start, pulled out music. I would bring, at that time, finally, a Bluetooth. Back in the 80s, it was a big boombox. But I pull out Bluetooth speaker and start playing tunes. And music, blues, rock, Motown, disco, um, some other things that I've been building up the station for quite some time on Sirius. And so we go through the summer just playing tournaments. We had 5 tournaments. So you could see how this trajectory is going. There was a learning curve here, folks. We started scrimmaging the B team every week. Jose was cool. The A team coach was arrogant, SOB. He didn't want to play. Like, okay, screw you. So we started playing with Jose. We started training and learning this. First tournament, they win their first match. Like, okay, cool. But the kids became a little arrogant right overnight. Like, oh, I see where you guys are going. I'm gonna let you fall on your butts. And they did. They lost their second match. But we still made it out of the group. So we got into the playoffs. Tournament 2, we made it to the semifinal. Tournaments 3, 4, and 5, we made it all the way to the final, the championship match. We lost all 3. We lost all 3. But at the end of the summer, when we did evaluations with the players and their parents, I asked every single kid the same question. How did that feel losing in 3 separate finals, especially the last one? And they were kind of pissed. So I knew that they went past being lacking confidence because you're not going to be mad about losing if you're lacking confidence. So they now were confident going into state league season. The state league season was 18 matches long time. So I think we were ready for it. By now we're playing more and more music all the time. They're playing more freely. The confidence is coming around, and I can go back and evaluate myself at the same time. I had come around fairly full circle. So just to capsulize it, we went undefeated and won state championship in those 18 matches.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
yeah, I mean, perfect. It's all true. All of this stuff. It's just wild.
Did you have any kids who were sort of, I'm going to be the top of the stack that you had to integrate into the team?
Interesting question. No,
Really?
all of those kids lack some, in some way, lack confidence. So like Mac um, was our goalkeeper, and I describe him as we first meet. And he showed up at the first meeting in his goalkeeper top and goalkeeper gloves, and they were all too big for him. He was short. He was a small kid. So Mac ended up uh, being one of our top players. He gained confidence. And then we
Yeah.
talk about it. I present this all throughout the book, and that especially there's so many threads that run through it that I think are so interesting that a reader can notice all of this. Hey, Allison, you mentioned the importance of music and how it plays. I didn't realize this until the second time I received the book back from our editor, that there's so much music in this that
Yep.
I started reading. I pulled up a second tab. I opened a second tab, went to Spotify. Every time a song came up, I plugged in that song. I listened to that song in Spotify, and then I went back to reading. So I ended up, and I'll be honest, I did not intend this, folks. I ended up writing a totally interactive book. So especially during the second half of the book, when we're getting into the play and stuff, Tab Benoit song comes up, or some of by R.L. Burnside is an old blues guy. Pull those up and have a listen to it, and then you'll get a feel for the way these kids play, because that's why I present music. It's not for them, it's for me to set a metronome for how I want them to play. And they ended up being able to play that way.
So
But
the
you also
music gives
used it in the hospital.
What's that?
You also used it in the hospital as you were doing your rehab.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I wanted to bring it in because, like Allison said, I totally agree with you. So much is brought out through music because I had music at that time in the early 90s. I had cassettes. So I did have music and a little boombox while I was in hospital. During the time I had to ask other people to turn on the tunes for me. That's what I did. Or MTV. Remember MTV at the
yeah,
time when they
Yeah.
had music videos?
yeah.
Yeah. So that had that on all the time, or ESPN or CNN.
Well, and
Uh,
music gives us a rhythm, which we don't always think about that.
mhm.
Because it's funny, this morning as I was writing my blog, I had music just came up on my phone. I have no idea. I don't even remember clicking on it.
Hmm.
And I found as I was writing, I was swaying back and forth.
Ah.
And it's the first time I've noticed that in myself. And it was like, I've got to listen to music more often when I'm writing
Hmm.
because it changed my whole persona. And so I'm
Hmm.
sure that's what happens with the kids on the field. They feel that movement and
They're free.
they're not,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. With these U19s, I haven't brought the box out yet because it's more talking about things, and I can't have I haven't started them to relax. And I'm talking about 16, 17, 18-year-old males. I mean, this is going to be tough
yeah.
because, yeah, they're going to be stiff. And once I bring that out after the tournament this weekend, I'll start to interject music into everything that we're doing. And that's when things really start to carry into them being creative and them starting to turn off the brain, and they start to play from the heart, play from, yes. And that's when I think we're really going to start carrying into the future with what these guys are going to do.
Yep. You said in the book that your mission is not to teach you, but to put you in a position to learn.
Hmm.
Um,
That
why?
that came up when I was writing the soccer atlas. I had to come up, I mean, this is going to be reading for the players. So I had to come up with ways of interjecting my philosophy into it. And I followed that to the T. I mean, I could look back. So before I was sick and I was teaching, I did that in the classroom. I ended up doing that with my 5 kids. And I do it out on the soccer field because so much of it is not just instructional, it's experiential.
Yep.
That's how I view the game. That's what life is, I believe, in the classroom. I mean, I was known for being out there and interacting. I mean, my classes went by fast because boom, 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 we were talking about stuff. we're talking about apartheid or what was going on in the Soviet Union and then Russia and everything in, in the United States through the 1960s. We would get into it and the students would interact. I don't see that much anymore.
Yep.
I don't I don't run my own class anymore. That could be part of it. But I still, even as a substitute, kids know me and I try to get some interaction, especially if we're doing something in social studies or history.
Well, I shared with somebody that when I went back for my master's degree in the last 10 years, I did online. And I did online because I was working all day. I just couldn't see myself sitting in a classroom. But by doing online, I found that I really had to be interactive. I had to go the extra mile. It wasn't just reading the textbook or listening to a lecture. And I learned so much more than I ever thought I would. And now I'm constantly taking, different certifications just because, like now I know I can learn. Whereas I was in high school and early college, I really thought I was a dummy because it was like I can barely retain a date and get it right on a test. But if I interact and I talk about it,
Exactly.
oh my gosh, I can tell you the whole story.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. But really, everything is so structured now.
Yeah.
I was just in a class with a student teacher and he was presenting an exam. And it was, oh, so how do you feel about, how was it about you writing the exam? Well, everybody in the department uses the same stuff. Oh, come on. So, he's not able to do his own thing and present
Yep.
his style. Everything's cut and dry, cut and dry. And I just don't like it. If I was back in a classroom, I think I'd probably have the principal breathing down my neck because it would be, I'm not doing it that way.
Yeah.
I'm doing it this way. I want those kids to interact. I want exchange information, not just here, go read this and then I'll give you a test and we'll test it and we'll see who no, it's interaction.
Now, I absolutely wanted to get to you adopted 5 children from Romania and Ethiopia. Why? I have so many questions. Why did you feel called to do that? What was that like? Because there's adopting children from other places. There's adoption itself. Can you talk about that?
Oh, so after losing the trial, I moved out west, and that was my period of breaking myself down. I worked for free for someone at a university in exchange for him trying to get me using his pull in other universities. Anyway, I was at Gonzaga University, and I was there my first season as an interim position. Then the full-time position came up, and one night watching a news show out of Seattle, and there was this couple that adopted 2 kids from Haiti after a disaster there. They lost their parents. I don't know where this came from. Within a few minutes, I was up in the office studying adoption. The next morning, I got on the phone, and luckily the athletic director didn't pick up because he would have asked me why, and I would have said, I don't know. But I left a message that please remove my name from consideration for the position of head coach.
Wow.
And started a year and a half long process. And I tell you, adoption is not easy. I mean, I ended up going crazy. I mean, I offered bribe. I wrote to Oprah. They never heard from her. I wrote to Colin Powell, who was Secretary of State at the time. Actually, it came down to Senator Patty Murray helped get his little brother and sister from Romania, come home. So it was the next year, a little boy from Ethiopia. 2 years after that, a little girl from Ethiopia. And 2 years after that, I went from coaching soccer to raising a basketball team of 5 kids. A little girl from Ethiopia. So, but all 3 came home as toddlers. All 3 luckily came home after diaper stage. The 3 from Ethiopia all experienced their parents die of AIDS. I mean, I think that this was perfect. Some people would call it was a calling. Please, I'm not that religious, folks. It's not God talking to me or anything. I cannot explain why that happened. It just happened. And it was the right thing to do.
I mean, that's phenomenal because most of us, you know, it's difficult to even think about adopting one child, let alone five, and from different countries and different backgrounds. Did you feel that you had to continue with their culture as you were raising them as well? Or did you just assimilate to this is where we are?
One of the first things we did with all five in different, all five were within 5 years. So from the oldest to the youngest, 5 years in between. It was crazy.
Yeah.
We did a lot of sitting down and watching cartoons. That's where I think a lot of humanity can still come through. Just cartoons. Yeah, old ones, that we were raised on. Yeah, Looney Tunes, some of the newer stuff. What's his face? The big red dog, Clifford the big red dog. I
Clifford,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, yep. And I would make them tot specials. Tata is Romanian for father, so it'd be tot specials. And always, oh, we're gonna go have tot specials for lunch. It was a sandwich
Yeah.
because because we made them together. And sometimes we would, oh, this is a good one. Bologna and cheese with mayo, and take some potato chips and smash it up in a sandwich is one of their favorites. Mine too. That's a good tout special. Yeah. Uh, so we experience thing again. My mission is not to teach you, but to put you in a position to learn. They did a lot of learning. It would
Yep.
be I'd walk them out to the bus, or I'd pick them up from the bus, walk through the yard to get there through the woods. And then it would eventually be wait for them to get off the bus and then to come to me. And then would it be eventually it would be I'm waiting in the house. You guys come home. So
Right.
it's step by step by step, you know, the way people should learn.
So creating rituals that made
Yes,
you a family. I mean,
exactly.
we
Full
talk a lot
experience, yep.
about we talk a lot about the importance of designing rituals
Hmm,
for what you need, because they're connective.
precisely. Yeah, to pulling through. But there are also some things, other ways about learning. And this is one of the things I point out in the book, that I'm not afraid to say certain things. So when my Ethiopian son, boy, he was doing morning kindergarten, and it was just him that was doing morning kindergarten at the time. There was one day I picked him up from school. He hopped in the car and he said to me, I'll never forget this. That's in the book. Tata, when am I going to turn white?
Mhm.
That really locked me in as his father. That made me mad, but it also made me mad from everything I grew up watching and experiencing through Walter Cronkite on CBS Evening News. Still hasn't changed. Here's a little black kid who
Yep.
knows what he was called, and he notices because of other kids that are white, they must have been mistreating him. He's a kindergartner, you know? So it's still one of these times where I can look and say, we haven't changed that much as a culture. This
Nope.
society, come on. So I'll present sort of thing like that. If I have a sounding board in through the book, I'll say it if I feel it needs to be said, and I said it. So
Yeah.
disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, in all that we're going through now, it's probably challenging for you as a family to explain all this, and I'll say it, craziness
Oh boy.
and inhumanity to humans, to people.
Mm,
Um,
hmm
how do you have those conversations with your children? I mean, they're from Ethiopia and Romania.
Well,
Um,
they're all in their mid-20s at least now. So
mhm.
it's on them. They're all living on the West Coast. They ended up staying
Oh,
on the West
okay.
Coast. I'm in Wisconsin. So we don't have opportunities to sit and discuss things like that. But I will say about in the classroom, teachers, with that I've experienced, I'm not saying everyone, they're instructed not to bring up a bunch of the stuff that's going on because it could ruffle some feathers and upset one side or the other. If there's that tells you something that I think is wrong. that we all, going back to what Karen had said earlier about the learning and experiencing what it's like for a disabled person and accepting and appreciating, you know, that we're not doing it. We're missing an opportunity because everyone's too afraid. We
You know,
have to be able to speak up.
you talk about ruffling feathers. My son, who is 35 years old, he works at a university. The team that works under him, we're all young students. And when his dad died, he went back to work a little too soon in reality. And a friend of his came to visit him at work. And he said to his team, I'm going to be sitting over on the other side of the room during lunch. I'm just going to have a private discussion with a friend of mine. One of the young girls overheard part of the discussion. She lost her mother 10 years ago. She went to HR and complained that my son was talking about the loss of his father, and it triggered her.
Oh.
Now, he didn't get in trouble, but it worried him because he didn't mean to trigger her, obviously.
No.
But he then came to me and he said, are you afraid to tell people what you're feeling? And I said, no. And if it triggers somebody, I'm sorry. But you know what? That's not the intention of it. It's different if it's the intention. And that's why I think the fact that teachers aren't allowed to talk about certain things is ridiculous. You know, if they're doing it intentionally to hurt somebody or whatever, or to get a point across, okay, it shouldn't be done. But why aren't we talking about Scott's hands? They're different and they do different things than mine. Boy, that's something that if I'm sitting in your classroom, I'm going to notice and I want to understand it. Why not talk about it?
And kids do. These are high school kids, and they do. You know, it might be a year or so later. You know, they're starting to talk to me about the book because I had announced that I have the book coming up. I started that early in the year, and kids are saying, "Hey, Miss Martin, how's the book going?" You know, one kid asked me this yesterday while I was typing away, and I said, "Well, you know what? I'm working on a screenplay right now." And it's, what? So there's that interaction still, you know, on I'm human to them, which I think is extremely important, especially today. So let's talk about things.
Well, and I think, and we're straying a little bit off the book, but I think it's relevant to what you go over in the book. And I tend to go my own way as well. But you really address beautifully judgment, how you handle judgment, how the kids handle judgment. And I think that that's a huge issue in today's world. So you have cyberbullying, you have people judged by the color of their skin, by their mental health, by their grief, by all kinds of things. And one of the things that I think you go through in the stories with pretty amazing nuance is judgment. So I wanted to sort of
thank you. I mean, I'm again not afraid. So I bring up the discrimination against my son, but I bring up discrimination against me. You know, there was an athletic director when I went out east for a job interview. This is after I lost the trial. And I heard him say across the hall to his secretary, "Why do they just interview a guy with no hands for his position?" I know I'm discriminated against. I know it. I've been discriminated against here. I applied for 2 head coaching positions here and was bypassed. And I know after they hire someone, I can go easily see what their experience is. I have a lot more experience. I know what it is, but you know, it's not illegal if they don't say it. I know it happens. I know it happened. So, you know, when it's things like the book or whatever comes out, you know, we won a state championship club, you know, a couple of years ago. I was like, kind of the heck with you guys. You know, I've won 2 now. And we'll see what this, I hope we win a third. And part of it will be underlying screw you to some people that disrespected me, which I
Mhm.
think I represent the disabled community. So don't do that because I just proved you wrong. When are you going to learn,
Yep.
that we can do anything that you could do, but better?
Well, I mean, that's why I think these conversations are really important, because
Exactly.
when you have these conversations and you say, okay, well, yes, this is true. My hands are prosthetic. I am
Yeah.
who I am. And my capacity, your capacity may, I assert, be actually bigger than it was when you were a young person going out into the world and the world was your oyster, but you hadn't experienced any challenges to that.
True. Very good point. Age has something to do with it too, I'm sure. And we all,
Agreed.
good. I think Karen brought this up, and I wish it were used more. And I've never seen it done. Bringing in elders into the classroom.
Yep.
I do remember something, I believe, when I was in high school or junior high, a teacher bringing in someone that was in the Vietnam War, a war veteran, and maybe even earlier, someone, World War II. But a lot of those kids my age had parents that were in there. Uh, so yeah, I don't think it's, lack of respect. It's let's get things done. Let's move on to the next thing. No, for God's sakes, this is life and everybody has to learn about it. So why not talk to someone that has experienced it? You've been around the block a few hundred times. Let's have you in the classroom and talk about life. That would be nice.
It's funny. I went to my and then after this, I'm going to do the final question and we're going to close.
Okay.
But I went to my high school, well, the school that I went to for 12 years, and they had a lecture with a Holocaust survivor today. And the entire middle and upper school were there. And alumni and parents were invited.
Good.
But great to hear lived history from
Yes.
an elder like that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Simply
Uh,
done.
so it was funny that you said that just
Yeah.
since I just came back from there. So my last question, from the book or from the podcast, what is sort of one piece of wisdom that you would give our listeners, our audience?
Kind of a two-part. Don't take life so seriously. And I think bigger, probably the main part. Cut yourself some slack. Cut yourself some slack. Don't get so downtrodden on things that you do wrong or improperly. It's part of learning to go through an experience. I have a statement. There's a sign that was up nearby a few years ago. I took this photo and I presented to the players that I've been working with since that time. And the sign said, be brave enough to suck at something new. Isn't that true? Be
Oh,
brave enough to suck
absolutely.
at something new. True or new. And because of what I'm presenting to these guys is something totally new with the
Yep.
way I run a training session, I run matches and stuff. So don't be afraid to suck at something new. I think we all have to be able to accept that because life is new from every day, isn't it? So it's okay to suck every day at something. We'll learn from it. We
Yeah.
learn from things. Yeah.
I love that.
Wow. I mean, you are inspirational, Scott. I'm so glad that we finally got this together. Um, I want to encourage everybody. The information for Scott's book will be in the show notes. Um, really, read it, follow Scott, and follow us because Allison, we're going to have him back in the future
Sure.
because there's just so much more to talk about.
The
Once
the
it
book
comes out.
the book drops June 9. It's up for pre-sale wherever people buy books online right now. But Play From Your Heart is up at that time. Anytime after that, you two want me on. I've got a select few group of people that I've been marking down that I would go back on their show for, and you guys are on it, okay?
You
So
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
yeah, you bet.
Thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate it.
And we will talk to all of you soon. Have a great day, everybody.